The trade tree you're about to watch was a popular request, and I kind of fought against it for a while. Because yes, one half of the trade tree is officially done, but the other half looks like it's just getting started. Why not give it some time to marinate, some time to evolve? We're just gonna have to do another trade tree about this in a few years. Who knows, maybe in a couple decades. Because these trade tree videos often have to do with teams. Which team won? Which team lost? Who achieved their goal? Who got more? Etc. But the more I think about it, the story to be told here isn't one of two teams, it's of two people. Because after all, the trade was 1-for-1. So let's do the Taylor Hall for Adam Larsson trade tree. This trade tree is the story of two men, but part of the reason it's such a big deal is what they did when they were boys. It's amazing given what's happened in his NHL career, but Taylor Hall was a perpetual winner. His OHL team, the Windsor Spitfires, were a force of nature. And it wasn't just because they were an amazing regular season team, and they were an amazing regular season team, but the hard-fought journey through the playoffs. During their back-to-back Memorial Cup runs, both of which happened before Taylor Hall was drafted, by the way, they had some incredible battles. One, I remember with the London Knights, who had John Tavares, Nazem Kadri, Michael Del Zotto was a big acquisition of theirs. The Spitfires beat the Knights in 5, which might make you think that the series was a cakewalk until you realize all 5 games went to overtime. In the OHL final, they take on Alex Pietrangelo's Barrie Colts, and this is one of my favorite stories. You'll have to just bear with me. I happened to be at this game in Barrie, and the crowd was going wild, and it was so loud in there, and part of the reason that it was so loud in there is all the fans in attendance got a box of macaroni and cheese under their seat as some promotional giveaway, but also as a noisemaker. So what happens? The game goes to overtime. The Spitfires get a power play. Ryan Ellis passes it to Taylor Hall. He shoots! Have you ever seen 300? Our mac and cheese will blot out the sun! And that night, the Windsor Spitfires did not fight in the shade. They got off the ice immediately, but they did end up winning the Memorial Cup. But they weren't done there, because the following year, they take on Jeff Skinner's Kitchener Rangers. They were another amazing team. Down 3-0 in the series. 1, 2, 3, 4. They come back and they win in the Memorial Cup again. That, along with his high-powered offensive production, is the kind of resume that got Taylor Hall to be the first overall pick in the 2010 NHL Draft, where he went first overall to the Edmonton Oilers. The following year, in 2011, the Oilers had the first overall pick again, but the choice was not as obvious. 2010, it was basically two guys, Taylor versus Tyler, Taylor Hall versus Tyler Seguin. In 2010, there were some amazing names available who have gone on to have amazing careers. Ryan Nugent-Hopkins is who the Oilers ended up picking first overall. Second overall, Gabriel Landeskog, now the captain of the Avalanche. Third overall, another Memorial Cup champion, and Jonathan Huberdeau, who went to the Florida Panthers. And fourth overall, Adam Larsson, who checks a lot of boxes. Sweden was a defense factory at the time, churning out amazing player after star after elite icons. Adam Larsson, he's well over 6 feet tall at 6'3". Check that box. He's gonna be over 200 pounds if he's not already. Check that box. Oh, and he shoots right-handed. Heck yeah, check that box. And it's probably a good bet that even though the Oilers did not pick Larsson in 2011, they would have known a decent amount about him. Hold that thought. Both Hall and Larsson were depended on for a lot at a very young age with their respective teams. There are exceptions to this rule, but generally you don't pick in the top 5 of the NHL draft by being very good. But Adam Larsson, who was a teenage defenseman in the NHL, which is rather rare, went all the way to the Stanley Cup final as a rookie with the New Jersey Devils, playing over 20 minutes a night during the regular season. Now, he didn't put up a ton of goals or points, but that wasn't his job. Just 2 goals and 18 points in 65 games in his rookie year, and unfortunately, only 5 games in those playoffs. Even more unfortunately, those 65 games he played as a rookie would be the most games he'd play in a season for a long time. Between the 2012 lockout that followed that trip to the Stanley Cup final and injuries, Adam Larsson did not play a full 82-game season until, ironically, his last season as a Devil. Again, not racking up a ton of points, 18 that season, but 22.5 minutes per night, in a season where he played 82. What about Taylor Hall? Well, that was the question at the time, but I think for some it might have been, what about Taylor Hall? Because in 2015-16, 2016, Hall's last as an Oiler, he also played in all 82 games, and he was pretty good. His 26 goals and 65 points led the Oilers that season. So why would it be what about Taylor Hall? Well, because this other kid would have led the team in scoring had he not broken his collarbone as a rookie. You might have heard of him. His name is Connor McDavid. But when that team was healthy, McDavid, Taylor Hall, Jordan Eberle, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins, they could score. That 15-16 Oilers team, while young, you could tell that when they were healthy and when they developed a bit, they were going to score. Taylor Hall, Leon Draisaitl was there, Connor McDavid was there, Jordan Eberle, Ryan Nugent-Hopkins. The problem was the defense. It was a combination of guys near the end of their career, journeymen, and young defensemen who might be good someday, but right now are being fed to the wolves. And it's a tale as old as trade tree time. We have a lot of this one thing, but not very much of this other thing. Why don't we take our lot of this thing and use it to get some of this? In that offseason, in the summer of 2016, the trade is 1-for-1. We're going to focus on Taylor Hall. We're going to focus on the New Jersey Devils side of this first. Hall's first season with the Devils in 16-17, it wasn't that great. 20 goals and 53 points in 72 games. Each one of those things I just said was less than the year before. Games played, goals, points, all of it. Yes, he still tied with Kyle Palmieri for the Devils team lead in points, and he did it in 8 fewer games. But still true. And all these storylines that seemed to follow him kept creeping up. Yes, he can score, but is he good enough defensively? Is this the kind of player you can win with, etc.? The following season, for 2017 and 18, I don't know what Taylor Hall did that summer, but it worked. In 76 games, there you go again. You can't play a full season. He had 39 goals and 93 points. Taylor Hall's previous career high in goals was 27. He had never cracked 30 in his life, and if he had played a full season, it is a very good bet that he would have scored over 40. And with a previous career high of 80 points, Hall's 93. If he had played the full 82, it's not out of the question that he could have hit 100. He dragged that Devils team. No, he put them on his back and walked them over the finish line into the playoffs. Yes, they ended up losing in the first round, but it wasn't for lack of trying on Hall's part. 6 points in 5 games, and for his effort, he won league MVP. One of the more controversial picks over the last couple decades. Because 93 points is great, but you know what's even better than that? 108! Which is what Connor McDavid, Hall's former teammate, had with the Oilers, but they did not make the playoffs like they did the year before. Oh, I didn't mention that part. Yeah, on top of Hall's numbers dipping in his first year out of Edmonton, the Oilers make it to the playoffs and have a pretty good run that, depending on who you ask, there's some controversy there that they should have beaten the Ducks because of ref shenanigans, and I'm not even saying they're wrong. Kessler held Talbot's pad. He did. How does that? But that's in the past now, and it was in the past in the season where Hall was the reigning MVP. Here's the thing. What does MVP stand for? Most valuable player. There was no player more valuable to his team than Taylor Hall. At least that was the argument, because he was able to drag that team who had no business making the playoffs into the playoffs, leading to the more than valid argument that, well, okay, I know the Oilers didn't make the playoffs with McDavid, but imagine if they didn't have him then. Hall has another amazing season the next season, scoring 37 points in 33 games, and oh dear, only 33 games. Injuries prevented Hall from repeating his performance from the previous season, and then the season after that, he still didn't really get it back. 25 points in 30 games with the Devils, which is good, only 6 goals. And I should probably mention that without Hall there to play the role of Superman, the Devils were kind of bad again. So they make a trade to a team that was hoping to no longer be bad. Taylor Hall was packaged with Blake Spears and sent to the Arizona Coyotes in exchange for Nick Merkley, Nathan Schnarr, Kevin Ball, a first-round pick in 2020, and a third-round pick in 2021. Now, this is usually where we go into what the Devils got, and we're going to do that, but I want to spend a little bit more time on Taylor Hall before we end it with him. Calling it an utter disaster would not be fair, but Taylor Hall did not exactly have the pop that a lot of people thought he was going to have in Arizona. In 35 games, he had 27 points and 10 goals. who knows? He might have had more and improved his pace, but the world stopped in the middle of that season. Did you know that? But the Coyotes made it to the playoffs in the bubble many months later, and then the Avalanche just toyed with them. Producer Drew likes that part. And then Taylor Hall is the belle of the ball in free agency. Yes, it is a truly unique free agency in mid-pandemic, but Taylor Hall is a free agent. This guy is nearly a point a game in a bad year, even if his goal scoring has dropped, and he's a former league MVP. You can get this guy for no assets at all, just cap space. I bet he's gonna get a ransom from a contender. And he signed for 1 year, $8 million with the Buffalo Sabres. What? And a lot of people thought that decision was kind of weird, but he triumphantly No, it was a nightmare. 19 points in 37 games with the awful Buffalo Sabres and just 2 goals. And it wasn't for lack of shots, he just shot 2.3% with the Sabres. But it's okay, you can trade him for a first-round pick. He's Taylor Hall. And the Sabres proceed to not even get a single first-round pick for Taylor Hall. He joins the Boston Bruins, and why would the Bruins go and get Taylor Hall? He's having the worst season ever. You cannot win with this player. In 16 games with the Bruins after an awful time in Buffalo, 8 goals, 6 assists for 14 points. He quadrupled his goal total from his time with the Buffalo Sabres in under half the games. So, how did Taylor Hall do? 5 points in 11 playoff games with the Bruins. That's not the most amazing thing, and they didn't win the Stanley Cup, but here's the thing, most teams don't. You ever notice that? How only one team wins it every year, and it's often not the team that made the big deadline acquisition? No, it's usually something like Barclay Goodrow, and then it works twice. We'll get into this more when we talk about Adam Larsson, but there was an air to this trade where you had to pick a side. It wasn't good enough that you thought the Oilers won for acquiring Larsson, or the Devils won for acquiring Hall. Or that it was a good idea for the Devils to get a forward and the Oilers to get a defenseman. It had to be one stank, the other was good. It's so rare in these trade tree videos, A, that we get a 1-for-1 trade, but B, we find a trade that seemed to genuinely damage both men's reputations. I don't necessarily mean within the league. I'm sure the Oilers liked Larsson fine and the Devils liked Hall fine. But it just feels like all these years later, all these teams later, so much water under the bridge, both of these guys are judged based on that trade. They're stationary in time, how old they were when that deal happened. You do see this in rare cases. Phil Kessel could not escape the comparisons to Tyler Seguin until he won back-to-back Stanley Cups. But the trade is 1-for-1 is something that is iconic in hockey Twitter, in the hockey universe, and something that is stuck to both players to this day. Now let's quickly talk about the haul that the Devils got for Hall, you see, before we move on to Larsson. First, there's Nick Merkley, the 30th overall pick in 2015. 6 years after being drafted, the winger is still trying to establish himself as an NHL player. Last season, which wasn't easy for anybody, Merkley played on 3 different teams in 3 different leagues. He played in Finland, he played in the American Hockey League, and he had 27 games with the Devils where he had just 2 goals. Merkley was traded to the San Jose Sharks in exchange for defenseman Christian Jaros, who is big, that's good, but also in Slovakia, which isn't much help to the Devils. Might be okay if he was still a prospect, but he was on the Sharks last year and he's 25. We'll move on to Nathan Schnarr, another part of the package that the Devils got for Hall. He was a 3rd-round pick in 2017. The center had 15 points in 33 AHL games last season, and that's really all there is to report. He's in the final year of his ELC. Moving on to Kevin Ball, who is a 2nd-round pick in 2018 as a defenseman. He's 6'6". He played most of his hockey in the AHL last season, but he did have 7 games with the Devils where he added 2 assists. I think you're starting to see why I want to revisit this trade tree in a few years. With the 1st-round pick that the Devils got in this deal, 18th overall, that's not too bad. They select forward Dawson Mercer. He's still just a teenager, it's kind of early, but he did have 36 points in 23 games in the QMJHL last season and 6 points in 7 games at the World Juniors for Canada, the pride of Newfoundland. And the last part of this package is pretty easy. The 3rd-round pick that the Devils got in 2021, they flipped. That pick was traded to the Washington Capitals for defenseman Jonas Siegenthaler, who played 8 games with the Devils last season. He didn't have any points, but he got a 2-year extension out of it, so he'll be on the Devils for a while, it looks like. And right now, for the Devils, because remember, this trade tree is only between the Devils and Oilers, that part of the trade tree is over. We spoke a bit about Taylor Hall and how hard of a time he's probably had escaping the echoes of this trade. I think for Adam Larsson, it's even more true. Because if you come in and you're Adam Larsson, you're going to be measured based on team success. Do the Edmonton Oilers win? Do the Edmonton Oilers lose? I make less than the guy against the cap, significantly less. And the Oilers have been looking for a player like this for a long time. You might remember the Jeff Petrie trade tree. They don't have him anymore. You might remember the David Perron trade tree, which led to the Oilers acquiring Griffin Reinhart instead of just drafting Matthew Barzal. The Oilers spent a lot of time and a lot of assets to acquire a player like this, and then they finally get one. How's he gonna do? Well, he had 19 points in 79 games, but who cares about any of that? Edmonton makes the playoffs for the first time in the Connor McDavid era, and that is huge. Everyone's excited to see how it goes. Maybe it's a young team who's gonna fail in the first round, and they don't. Larsson, not exactly counted on for his offense, was a big part of the Oilers' performance during those 2017 playoffs, adding 6 points in those 13 games that they played. It was a little bit of vindication for the young man. You all laughed at the fact that this trade was 1-for-1, and now look at us, we're an up-and-coming team, and we're in the playoffs. I don't know if he was the one yelling and screaming from the rooftops that was the case. He didn't exactly seem like the type, but fans on both sides, across all fan bases, were picking sides here. And I'm sorry, the Oilers side was clearly winning. But then, remember what happened? I told you. The next year, the Oilers drop, and Taylor Hall wins the Hart Trophy. And whether the Oilers were playing well or not, Larsson became a monument to the disappointment of missing the playoffs, rightly or wrongly. Probably wrongly. He would play a full 82-game season the next year, but no more playoff success. All while dealing with the brutal nature of playing in the NHL, the travel, the going up against monsters and getting crashed into the boards and having to do the crashing into the boards, intermittent issues with injuries, family tragedies, all these horrible things piling one on top of the other. But this past season, 2021, in the unique circumstances that we saw, the All-Canadian division, the 56-game season, Larsson played a full 56 and was pretty good. Depending on who you ask, last season for Adam Larsson was his best as an Oiler. So how does it end? Well, kind of dully for the purpose of this trade tree. The pending unrestricted free agent gets claimed by the Seattle Kraken in the expansion draft. He signs there, and that's it. And now I wonder this. Taylor Hall is many teams removed from this trade now, and Adam Larsson is now in a different market. Can both players finally stop having to answer for this trade? Now, you might be getting defensive saying, hey, I was never against Adam Larsson, I was against Oilers management, or oh, I was never against Taylor Hall, I was against Devils management. Now, both players are gone. They've moved on. Taylor Hall maybe less so because he's with the Bruins, but I'm cheering for them individually. So, what do you think? I'm sure you have some thoughts. Leave a comment in the comment box down below. And for our next trade tree, we see you and we hear you yelling and screaming for a certain trade tree. Let me just say that we're on it. But for now, that is it for this one. Thank you very much for watching. Click like if you like this video. Click subscribe if you really liked it. Tell your friends. Trade was... We don't have to say it anymore. We don't.